Alright guys, so in this video our main goal is to actually create functionality for subscribing a user to Mailchimp. But just before we start working on that, let's do some house cleaning things here first. So you might know that generally it's not a good idea to leave our sensitive information like API keys inside our files like this. Now technically it wouldn't be a problem because this does run on the server, so it won't be exposed to your client. But if you do decide to push this code to a public GitHub, this will be exposed. So for that reason, we're going to take this information and put it into an env file, which is not going to get pushed to a repo. All right, so let's go ahead and create our env file inside the root directory of our project. So I'm going to say .env. And then what we'll do is we're just going to take your API key, whatever you had in here, and we're going to paste it into a variable, an env variable. So I'm going to call it Mailchimp API key. All right, and I'm going to write some gibberish here. Oops, I think it's numbers. Okay, and you obviously want to put your real API key here. And we'll do the same thing for the server prefix. I don't think this is actually sensitive information, but let's do it just to keep things in the same place. So Mailchimp server prefix. And I'm just going to put mine, so US7. Okay. Yeah, just remember, this is not my actual API key, so I'm just going to leave it here for now. Save that, and then in here, instead of having these hard-coded values, we're going to say process.env, and then the name of the variable we gave these. So first one is going to be Mailchimp API key, and for this one, process.env, Mailchimp server prefix. Perfect. All right, so I think that's looking good. Just gonna give a little more spacing here. Okay, so that's looking good. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to start modifying some code in here. So before we touch this code here, which we will be changing, I actually want to go to my form, so a subscribe form, and we're going to start making some changes here. So first of all, we want to do something when the user tries to submit the form. So when they click the subscribe button. So let's go to our form element, and we're going to add an onSubmit handler. Okay, and let's take in our event object here. And we're going to run a function called handle submit, which I'm going to create in a second, and we're going to pass the event to it. So let's go up here now. We're going to create that function. So I'm going to say const handle submit, and it's going to be an arrow function. So let's take in our event. And we also want to make it asynchronous right away, so you'll see why later. So in here, the first thing we want to do is prevent the default behavior of refreshing our browser. So we're going to say prevent default. And the next thing we'll do is we'll have to extract the data from our form somehow. And there's many ways to do this. We could do it using controlled inputs and then just use our state to do that. But I'm going to choose a different route here. I'm going to use the form data object. Okay, so if you've never used this before, I'll explain how it works. But I think it's just an easier way to deal with it, especially when we have multiple inputs. Like, it's probably a bit of an overkill for just one input like we have here. But if you do decide to collect more information from your users, like maybe first name, last name, etc., then it'll make more sense. So I'm going to use form input right away, just in case later on I decide to expand my form with more fields. All right. So let's go in here. We're going to create a constant form data. Data, and in here we're going to say new form data, and we're going to pass in target. So what this is going to do is it's going to create an object where the fields or the keys are our inputs, and specifically the fields are going to correspond to whatever value you have for your name attribute here. Okay, so for us it's email, and then the values of this object is going to be the value of our actual inputs. So you'll see how this works in a second. So let's go ahead and test this. We're going to extract the email field from here. So let's say const email equals to, I'm going to say form data, and we can use a get method on that, and I will just say email, and for now we'll just log it to the console. So console log email, just to see if we're properly getting our value here. Okay, so let's save this, and if you had previously stopped your server, let's start it again. So npm run dev, okay, and let's open our console. So again, when we enter a value here, we expect it to be shown in our console. So let's just enter an email here, say peter@gmail.com, and there it is. Perfect. So that's working as it should. Let's go back to our code. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our actions, and we're going to start working on our actual action here. So I'm going to actually just make changes to the one we already have. So first of all, I prefer to use the more modern syntax, so arrow functions. So we're going to change this into an arrow function. So let's say const, and we're going to start actually with export, because we will have to export this function. So export const, and I'm going to call it add subscriber. Okay, and then let's just get rid of all of this, and there we go. We turned this into an arrow function. Now we want to take in here our form data from the client, and we have await underlined. That's because it has to be asynchronous. So let's put async here. Perfect. So we're taking in our form data, and in here we're going to actually extract the values that we want, right? So for us right now is just the email. So instead of doing it here, we're actually going to cut this piece of code, and we're going to paste it in here. All right, so let's do it right here. Okay, so we're getting our email from form data. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to actually subscribe that email to Mailchimp. Now, how do we do that? Well, for that, we'll go back to our docs, Mailchimp docs. So remember last time we stopped here where we were doing our ping to Mailchimp. So let's go to the left side, and we need to go to, I believe it's API reference. There's a lot of options here, so bear with me. And then we'll go to lists and audiences, and then members, and then add member to list. Okay, so this is what we want to look for. Add member to list, post. Okay, post request. So let's click expand, and here it's going to give us the method that we're going to need to perform this function. Okay, so the method is called add list member. So let's go ahead and just copy this part of the code. So just these lines. go back to VS Code, and we'll just paste it in here. And by the way, let's delete this. We won't need this anymore. And let's get rid of the variable. We don't need this right now. Perfect. Now, one thing that's really important to change here is you will notice that they're calling this method on the client variable, and for us, we actually saved it to a Mailchimp variable. All right, so we need to change this from client to Mailchimp. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So let's do that. And of course, if you did put client here, then you would just keep client on here. Okay, so this is looking good. Now, you notice we need to enter our list ID. So what is a list ID? We haven't seen this yet. So let's go to Mailchimp, and I'll show you how to get that. So if you go to your contacts, and in here you want to click on settings, and as you can see at the bottom, you have your list ID. Now they call it here audience ID, but it's the same thing as list ID. Okay, so what you want to do is copy this ID, and then we're going to go in here, and I think we're going to save it right away to our environment file as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and here add a third variable. We'll call it Mailchimp. I'll call it audience ID, and then just paste the value. I'm just going to put gibberish here for myself for now. Save that. Let's go back to actions, and we're going to do the same thing we did earlier here. So process.env Mailchimp audience ID. Okay, good. So that is the first argument that this method is taking in, and after this we have an object with some key value pairs. The first value, or the first key I should say, is the actual email. So remember, we have that email right here, so we're just going to pass it in dynamically. So email, whoops. And the next thing we need is some kind of status here, which is a string. So for us, we're going to put in subscribe because we want to subscribe our user. So subscribed. All right, this is looking good. Now I actually want to surround this in a try and catch block to make it easier to deal with the requests and any errors. So at the top here, let's go ahead and have a try catch block, and we're going to take this code and put it inside the try block. And by the way, let's get rid of this run. We won't need this either before I forget. Perfect. So we're making a request to Mailchimp to subscribe our email. And if that request is successful, we want to return some kind of response to our front end, to the client. So let's go under here, and we're going to say return, and we'll just return an object with a key value pair. So we're going to say success message, and let's use template literals here because we want to interpolate our email. So we'll say success, and then let's interpolate the email. So email was successfully added or subscribed to our newsletter. Beautiful. Let's copy this because we'll have very similar return message here. So in case there is some kind of error with our subscription, we're going to say, instead of success message, we're going to say error message. And here we'll say oops. Let's just say there was a problem subscribing the email to our newsletter. Okay, so we can keep it like that for now. All right, I think this is looking good. Okay, so let's just go over once more what we're doing here, okay? So first of all, the name of our function is add subscriber, and we're taking in the form data, which comes from here, right? We will actually complete this very soon, but the form data is coming from here. And we're extracting the email from the form data. And then we're doing a call to Mailchimp API to subscribe this email to our newsletter. We're putting in the audience ID to which we want to subscribe this email, and then the actual email, and then the status that we want. If this is successful, so if the subscription works, then we return this message saying success, this email was successfully subscribed. And if there is an issue, we're going to return this error message. So I hope this is making sense. Let's save this. And let's go back to our form again. And we're going to import our server action here. So let's go ahead and import add subscriber from actions. And we need to call it right here in our handle submit. So we're going to say, first of all, we're going to save the result to a constant. So let's say const res equals to, let's say, await. And then we're going to say add subscriber and pass in our form data. Okay, and for now, let's see, should we, yeah, we might as well finish this off right now. So depending on which response we get, we want to do update our state to either a success response or an error response, right, to give to the user. So let's do this. We're going to say if res dot success message. So if our response contains a success message, we're going to update our success state, right? Subscribe success state. So we're going to say set subscribe success, and we're going to pass in our actual success message, right? Remember, we defined that here. This is our success message. All right. So res success message, perfect. And then else, so if it's not success message, if you don't have a success message on there, that means we have the error message, right? That's the only other option we can have. We're going to say set error or subscribe error is the name of our state, res dot error message. Okay, I think this is looking good. So let's save that, and we're going to test it out and see if we haven't forgotten anything. So let's go back to our form. Okay, let's close this. And I should mention I've already updated the values for my .env variables to my actual credentials, so hopefully everything will work. So let's type in here peter123@hotmail.com, subscribe, and there we go, success. Peter123@hotmail.com was successfully subscribed to our newsletter. Perfect, that's exactly what we wanted. And if we look in here, we'll see that we should see that email right here. And there he is. Okay, and the status, as you can see, is subscribed. Perfect. All right, so that's working well. Now let's go back to our code for a second. notice we have pending state here, which we're not currently using. So we want to implement that right now. So what's going to happen is when the user clicks subscribe, our button is going to turn gray, so it's going to become inactive, and the text is going to change to processing. All right. So to make that work, all we have to do is let's go right under prevent default here, and we're going to set our pending state to true. Okay, so we're going to say set is pending to true, and then at the end we're going to say set is pending to false. Let's save that, and let's try subscribing another email. So we're going to say jim123@gmail.com. There we go. I hope you saw that. So that seems to be working well. And by the way, in case you're wondering why it turned gray, that's because here in my globals.css, I have previously put in this style here. So button disabled, apply BG gray 400. This is a Tailwind class. So that's why it's turning gray. Okay, so I think this is looking good. Let's actually do one more thing. Let's check out our error message. So let's click subscribe again on the same email address. And this should actually not work because Mailchimp does not allow you to subscribe the same email address more than once. So let's try that. Okay, and notice we have here, oops, there was a problem subscribing this email. Now, there's a bit of an issue because we're getting both of these messages, and we don't want that. We ever want to only have one message at a time here. So that should be an easy fix. Let's go back here, and under set is pending, we're going to clear our success and error states. So we're going to say set subscribe success to an empty string, and we're going to do the same thing for error. Okay, I think that's looking good. So save this, and let's just click subscribe again, and now we should see just the error message all the way across. So there we go. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so I think we've achieved our goal here. Let's go back again to see if Jim is in there. So we have Peter, but if we refresh, hopefully Jim will be here as well. And there he is. I'm not sure why Jim is underneath Peter, but anyway, they're both in here. Great, so good job if you were able to make this work. I think this lesson has been long enough, so I'm going to stop here, and I'll see you in the next one.